Next July, we will celebrate the 250th anniversary of the founding of this great country. As we approach this monumental commemoration, it's worth reflecting from time to time on the enduring principles that have made our nation unique in the world. And perhaps the most foundational of these ideas enshrined in the Declaration of Independence itself is that all of us are created equal, and we are endowed with our Creator with certain unalienable rights. The notion that we're all of equal dignity and must be treated equally under the law was somewhat of a revolutionary idea, but it does provide the basic foundation for our constitutional republic. All other rights and freedoms that we hold dear flow from that idea. Americans defend the right to free speech because we believe in the equal dignity of every human being and their right to speak as they wish. So our Constitution prohibits government from infringing upon we the people's ability to speak our mind. And as a country, we welcome open dialogue and debate about even the most controversial issues. It almost goes without saying, but sometimes I think we need to remind people that free speech is essential to our democratic republic, to the whole idea of self-government. If people cannot have open conversations and even arguments, then it becomes impossible for us to be informed about the most important issues and to be able to make decisions as we, the voters, we the people, decide at our elections or in petitioning our government, another right guaranteed by the Constitution. But as I indicated earlier, not every country or culture shares these commitments. In fact, many are riddled with ideologies that run directly counter to these ideals that have sustained our democratic republic for nearly 250 years. In the 20th century, totalitarian ideologies like communism and Nazism began to emerge. These radical schools of thought ran counter to American ideals of liberty and equality, placing the state, not the person, but the state, at the center of society, while sidelining the individual, the family, and most especially religion. Totalitarian belief systems defy American principles of freedom of speech and association, the protection of private property, and the rule of law. Unfortunately, we have seen a resurgence of another vile ideology in recent times, anti-Semitism, the world's oldest form of hate. A recent report from the FBI showed that nearly a 6% increase of religiously motivated incidents against Jewish Americans between 2023 and 2024. In 2024, the same report found that 70% of religiously motivated hate crimes targeted Jews, who make up only 2% of our population. Let me repeat that. This report found that 70% of religiously motivated hate crimes were directed at Jews, 70%, even though Jews only make up 2% of our population. And 41% of young American Jews between the age of 18 and 29 said they had experienced anti-Semitism at least once in the last year. As we can all recall with horror, 2 years ago on October the 7th, Hamas terrorists conducted the deadliest terrorist attack against Israel in history, the worst cause of death since the Holocaust for Jews, resulting in the murder of 1,200 people and the brutal raping of women and young girls, and hundreds of hostages taken at the same time. Unimaginably, in the wake of this horrible tragedy and the ensuing war in Gaza, many elite educational institutions in the United States shockingly responded with a flurry of anti-Semitism. We saw faculty at some of the most prestigious universities in America openly celebrating this devastating attack, while some students blatantly threatened to slit the throats of Jewish students on campus. The president of Harvard, we may recall, was forced to resign as a result of her lack of moral clarity on this issue. There should be no confusion between good and evil, and this was clearly motivated by evil and hate. When pressed in committee hearings on anti-Semitism on whether Harvard policies prohibited students for calling for the genocide of Jews, she said, quote, "It can be, depending on the context," close quote. Shameful. Republicans in the House and the Senate rallied to the defense of American Jews facing this rising tide of hatred from the radical fringes of the left, while unfortunately too many of our colleagues across the aisle left them out to dry. For example, in 2024, in May, we introduced a resolution led by Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina condemning anti-Semitism on American college campuses, yet this was blocked by senators on the other side of the aisle for some reason. Some Democratic House members even visited these protests to show solidarity with the very people spreading hateful rhetoric, such as Zionists don't deserve to live. Vice President Kamala Harris even chose not to preside over the joint address to Congress of the Prime Minister of Israel, instead preferring to keep a previously scheduled commitment to address a sorority gathering in Indianapolis in an obvious snub for the Prime Minister and Israel. There are increasing signs that the Democratic Party has lacked conviction to stand up to the most vile elements of their base. Some of it have even openly embraced anti-Semitism. The newly elected mayor of New York City refused to condemn terrorism in an interview on national television, saying, quote, he doesn't really have opinions about the future of Hamas in Israel. I find it too curious that just 2 years ago he said, quote, when the boot of the NYPD is on your neck, it's been laced by the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces. This is the newly elected mayor of New York City. And when asked how he would have handled the protests on Columbia's campus, he said, I would have not sent the police to Columbia. Despite his refusal to use police to quell these campus riots, Mamdani has expressed on multiple occasions a willingness to direct the police to arrest Prime Minister Netanyahu if he were to ever visit New York City. The left has openly embraced this radical candidate, and now he's been elected as mayor of America's largest city. But while the Democratic Party has unfortunately embraced anti-Semitism in too many instances, Republicans under President Trump have continued to make clear that what we stand for and have not shied away from making clear what we stand against. President Trump's leadership in the fight against anti-Semitism has been undeniable. In his first term, he signed a landmark executive order giving new authorities to the Department of Education to investigate anti-Semitism complaints on college campuses and university campuses. When he was returned to office in 2025, one of his first actions was to sign another executive order to address anti-Semitism that reaffirmed and built on the successes of his 2019 order. In February, President Trump's Department of Justice formed a new task force to combat anti-Semitism, particularly at our nation's schools. So President Trump has made clear that anti-Semitism has simply no place in America, on the right or on the left. Unfortunately, his predecessor wasn't so clear. But President Trump, unlike his predecessor, has had no hesitation directly confronting the anti-Semitism lurking still in our higher education system. President Biden has been gone from the Oval Office for months now, but unfortunately there are still forces capitulating to the radicals who embrace this vile ideology. But I'm thankful that by and large Republicans have not done the same. Even when storied institutions like the Heritage Foundation have sent mixed messages about their commitment to individual liberty and freedom of speech and opposition to this vile form of hatred directed at Jews, prominent voices in the Republican Party have courageously condemned those who ascribe to anti-Semitism, including some who claim to be conservatives. Standing up for the truth and condemning evil does not amount to canceling people. Freedom of speech and freedom of association both allow institutions and individuals to condemn evil when they see it. I believe that all Americans should continue to stand with Jewish Americans against the rising tide of anti-Semitism. As we approach the 250th anniversary of this great country of ours, I hope all of us alike will recommit ourselves to upholding the dignity of every individual in this country and around the world. Mr. President, I yield the floor.